Good and Erev Shabbos. This week is a special Shabbos. It's Shabbos Shkolim. Shabbos Shkolim because it coincides with Rosh Chodesh Adar. It says in the beginning of the tractate of Shkolim, Be'echad ba'Adar mashmin al Shkolim. The first of Adar, the first of the month of Adar, we would make it be heard about the Shkolim. Now, the basic understanding of this Mishnah is that the fiscal year began with the month of Nisan. Now, the month of Nisan is when the fiscal year began, and everybody had to contribute to the Shkolim, with the Shkolim. So, in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, so 1 month before, 1 month prior, it was announced, let it be heard that everybody should get ready to, as we would say in our times, open your checkbooks and contribute for the shkolim. I just want to focus on an unusual word of this language in the Mishnah, mashmian, let it be heard. In fact, there's no Babylonian Talmud of this Mishnah. There's no Talmud Babli. But there is the Jerusalem Talmud, there is the Yerushalmi, Talmud Yerushalmi. So the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud says, my mashmin. What does it mean? Mashmin. Let it be heard. So the Yerushalmi says, machrizin. We declare it. So if that's what the Mishnah meant, there's a declaration. Why did the Mishnah just say? We have a declaration. Be'echad of Adar, in the first of Adar, Machrizan al Shkolim, there's a declaration about the Shkolim. So I think this teaches us a very important and powerful lesson about how to communicate messages. That we don't communicate messages by making declarations. We communicate messages by letting them be heard. And the difference is very subtle, but it's very important. And that is that we have different groups of people and different individuals, and everybody hears them in different ways. And a very important example of that is last week's Torah portion. God tells Moshe to go to the men and hear the message of the giving of the Torah, and go to the women and hear the message of the giving of the Torah separately. For example, he says, Ko Tomer LeBeis Yaakov, V'sagi LeBnei Yisrael. Go tell the Beis Yaakov, those are the women, and tell the Bnei Yisrael, those are the men. 1 second. Wasn't there one message of Torah and Mitzvahs? Wasn't there one message of Torah Judaism? Why is there different focus groups? Why is Moshe going to talk to the men separately and going to talk to the women separately? Or furthermore, when it comes to the Pesach Seder, there's 4 sons sitting at the table. There's the wise son asked the question, the rebellious son asked the question, there's the simple son that asks the question, there's the son that doesn't know how to ask that we engage him. And with each son, there's a different response. Why is there a different response for each son? Isn't there just one universal truth of Torah, one universal truth of mitzvahs? Why is there 4 different responses? And the answer to this is, yes, there is one universal truth of Torah and mitzvahs, but the way each individual needs to hear it is in a different way. The way the wise son hears the message is differently than the way the rebellious son needs to hear the message. The way the rebellious son hears the message is differently than the simple son, and so on. The way the simple son hears the message is differently than the way the son that doesn't know how to ask. And the way the men hear the message is differently than the way the women have to hear the message. And so on and so forth in our times today. The way the people in Israel hear the message of Torah and mitzvahs is perhaps differently than the people in the United States have to hear the message. It's one message of Torah and mitzvahs. But for different cultures, for different groups, and people have to hear the messages differently. And that's what this Mishnah means. It doesn't say machrizan, it's not a declaration. We have to let people hear it in their language. People hear it with their understanding. And that's an art that has been lost over time. Because sometimes we just take the bullhorn and we try to make these declarations. We try to scream over each other, my declaration is stronger than your declaration. As opposed to listen to each other. To listen to each other by trying to understand each other. We have to let it be heard. Even the messages of Torah and mitzvahs. The message of Torah and mitzvahs have to let it be heard from one to another. Have to be tailor-made from one to another. Yes, there's one universal truth of Torah and mitzvahs. But as we find from the four sons, the one universal truth has to be understood and let it be heard in a very individual way. I wish you all a peaceful and uplifting Shabbos.